as we are heading to decision day, we know for a fact that there are still a couple of playoff position that is up for grabs in the Western Conference, but in terms of the Eastern Conference, all the playoff spots is pretty much set, and the reason why that is the case is because New England won. New England is able to clinch their playoff spot this week by winning 2-0 against NYCFC, and because of that, these next two results really didn't matter. The fact that, even if Chicago or Orlando City win, or even Montreal winning against Atlanta, New England is still going to clinch their playoff spot because all they need is a win in this game to basically clinch those spot. But don't worry, I'll still look at these games even though in the end it didn't really mean anything and all of these teams unfortunately got eliminated. But New England, of course, they clinched their playoff spot, and they did it in style by beating the best team in the Eastern Conference of NYCFC, and they shut them out in this game 2-0 against them. Now, in the first half, there was definitely chances for both teams to get the first goal, but unfortunately, that didn't happen, and as we head into the second half, this is when NYCFC really started to threaten a little bit. And Matt Turner, he definitely made a couple of very decent saves, not only in the first half, but also in the second half to keep this one at 0-0. And I feel like with him keeping this game at 0-0, it really gave a chance for the Revs to potentially win this. Because, as I said, both teams had chances in the first half. And although NYCFC looked like they were the better team in the first bit, I thought New England was eventually going to get back into this. And they did get back into this game. And they were finally able to find that opener, which they score in the 66th minute when Bunbury scores from Pineda and Bo to give them a 1-0 lead. Then they double that lead in the 80th minute when Gustavo Bo scored an absolute filthy of a chip from Zahibo to give New England a 2-0 lead. Like, the way that he basically just chipped that one over Sean Johnson's head, I mean, that is just a very, very filthy goal. And I also forgot to put goal of the week with a question mark too, because you could argue that could also be the goal of the week this week. But yeah, like I said, New England, with this win, they clinched their playoff spot, and in terms of the shots in this game, 12 shots compared to 14 that NYCFC had, 3 shots on goal compared to 7 that NYCFC had, 8 shots off target compared to 4 that NYCFC had, 1 shot that was blocked compared to 3 that NYCFC had, and possession-wise, 40% possession compared to 60% possession. And you wonder, with this big win for New England, can they, of course, carry this big win and head to next week when they play against Atlanta, which, I know that game is kind of a little bit meaningless because I believe New England doesn't really have a chance to potentially get the 6th spot. In fact, let me just pull up the standings right now. I forgot to do this before I do this video, and I should be pulling up the standings from now on when I look at previews and reviews in terms of these last couple of weeks, or in this case the last 2 weeks of the season, because the standings really kind of matter. And unfortunately this thing is being slow to me today, but I believe they're going to be stuck in that 7th spot no matter what, because the team that is currently 6th place, which I believe it's TFC that is currently 6th, is I think have a 4-point gap on them, and if that is not the case, then I think they might still have a chance when they go and face Atlanta in the next match, which that's also going to be an interesting game too, because, with New England, after this big win against NYCFC, and certainly they have a lot of confidence heading to that Atlanta game, and Atlanta themselves, ever since Joseph Martinez went down, they have really struggled in these last 2 matches. You wonder, could all of a sudden, when we thought that, looking at that game, Atlanta was going to win that one, and that, there was really no question whatsoever that Atlanta is going to be heavy favorites. It might not be the case now with the way that New England kind of started to get things going. And as I now have the standings up here, not quite sure why this does not go down, only show the top 5 spot. Oh, there we go. So, yes. So technically, New England still have a chance to get 6th place, and actually, they still have a chance to get fifth place too if they are able to get a win, and hope that the Red Bulls, of course, does not get a win. So they can still climb up the table, but, that game against Atlanta, like I said, that could be a very interesting game, and that if they, of course, win that game against Atlanta, that this is going to be a dark horse team heading into the playoffs this season. But either way, moving on in terms of the next match, is going to be Chicago and TFC, and for these next two matches, I'm going to be talking about the teams that was chasing New England for that final spot, but ultimately failed because New England, of course, was able to win their game. And, in these two teams that was chasing New England for that final spot of the playoffs didn't even win this week. Chicago, they drew 2-2 against TFC, and in the first half, there was no score. Second half, TFC got on the board first when Altidore scores from Delgado to give TFC a 1-0 lead. Chicago then equalized 9 minutes later when Katai scores from Frankowski to make it 1-1. Herberts then gives Chicago the first lead of the game from Gaetan to make it 2-1, but that lead only lasts for 3 minutes because Gonzalez then equalized from Pozuelo to tie the game up at 2 apiece. And in terms of shots in this game, 15 shots compared to 10 that TFC had, 7 shots on goal compared to 4 that TFC had, 6 shots off target compared to 3 that TFC had, 2 shots that was blocked compared to 3 that TFC had, and possession-wise, 48% possession compared to 52% possession. And, Chicago, I think, at the end of this game, and, they, of course, are eliminated from the playoffs, but I think they definitely are going to still hate their heads high, knowing the fact that bright things could happen with this team, As I'm going to be doing the moving forward series with all these elimination teams, Chicago is definitely one of the team that I am kind of looking forward to do the moving forward series because, with them next year moving back to Soldier Field and leaving SeatGeek Stadium, which, by the way, this is the final game that Chicago is going to be playing at SeatGeek Stadium. And if you thought that this game was going to be a sold-out crowd because people are going to really miss the stadium, yeah, no. There was plenty of empty seats in this game, and you can clearly tell that this team clearly need to get out of Bridgeville and move back to Chicago. And it'll be interesting to see whether or not if that can, of course, draw some of the people into the stadium and watch this team play. But it's also the fact that now that they're under new ownership and, if they, of course, are going to get some money pumping into the club and that they can, of course, spend some money to get improve this team, then, yeah, I think there's definitely some bright future in this team. I mean, when you look at this team, I don't think this is really a bad team. I think maybe you could say that the defense could improve a little bit, but overall on the attack, they have some very dynamic player on the attacking end too. So, they can, of course, short up their defense, and hopefully some of these players that I feel like this season kind of underachieved a little bit, and that they can, of course, get back to their level, then Chicago could definitely be a dangerous team heading into next season. But as for TFC, again, this is another game where you could say that maybe they could have won this one, and that there's still a lot of questions surrounding TFC of the fact that what in the world are they going to be looking like once playoffs begin. Like, I've been keep saying about TFC of the fact that, I can definitely see this team making a deep run in the playoffs if some of their attacking player like Pozuelo and Altidore is on their game. But there's time where in crucial moments they don't come through the clutch, and they, of course, end up not getting all 3 points and not getting a win in those games. And that in the postseason, if you won't come clutch in those moments, that's what I do have some concern about this. And especially, I'm pretty sure that TFC, if there's one thing that they do not want in the postseason, is that they have to go all the way to penalties to try and win the game, because it's been shown that TFC is not good with penalty kick shootout. In fact, the most recent example is the Canadian Championship versus Montreal, where they lost the penalty kick shootout, and I believe that's now 3 straight penalty kick shootout that I remember that they have lost. The more recent one was the CCL Champions League final against Chivas, where they lost that penalty kick shootout, and then, of course, the one in in the MLS Cup back in 2016 when they lose to the penalty shootout to the Seattle Sounders. So there's one thing that they definitely don't want to do in the playoffs is that it will go into a penalty kick shootout because they are pretty much over free from what I remember in terms of their last couple of time going into a penalty shootout situation. But moving on, in the next match is Orlando City drawing 1-1 against FC Cincinnati. Now, whereas I feel like Chicago, there's definitely some promise about the fact that in next season they definitely could be a team that might be a playoff team and might be a team that should bring some excitement to the fan base. I'm not so sure about Orlando City. I mean, they do have some young guys out there that can, of course, bring some excitement into this team, but this is another season where they failed to make the playoffs, and you can see this fan base are getting fed up in terms of them not making the playoffs. And knowing the fact that next season, when Inter Miami joins the league, then they are basically going to be left out as the second fiddle team in terms of all those Southeast team in MLS right now. I mean, I don't think in terms of them thinking that Atlanta is like their main rival. Well, now it doesn't seem like it anymore, and that if Miami does become just as good as what we've seen them that they could be. I mean, I already heard that some people say that they could potentially be the next LAFC or next Atlanta. Then Orlando City is going to be quickly forgotten, and that's what I do have some concern about this team in terms of some of the loyalty that some of their fans are going to show to this team. Now, having said that, looking at this game and, kind of going a little bit toward talk about the future and the fact that I, of course, will cover that when I do the moving forward series in this team. When you look at this game, they definitely did not play well at all, Orlando City. And FC Cincinnati, they got the first goal, and it's Alan Cruz, who seems like that's pretty much their main goal scorer now. And when you have your main goal scorer as your midfielder player, you know that you are a very bad team. But Alan Cruz scores from Ledesma and Gallo, I think that's how you pronounce his name, to give them a 1-0 lead. Then it looked like they could have had the second goal when Roland Lamar was brought down in the box by Brian Rowe and Smith, but no penalty kick was called, and I believe Lamar kind of got sandwiched between Rowe and Smith in that play, and I actually don't know how that's not a penalty. Like, clearly both of those guys were not even going for the ball, and that the ball kind of ran away from them before they basically just brought down Lamar in the box. I mean, that clearly should have been a penalty, but it wasn't given in that case, and we had to have time at 1-0. Now, Orlando City did eventually get the equalizer, but the bad news is they got the equalizer in the 91st minute, and it's Benji Michel that scores from Dwyer and Nani. And if there's one player that I think maybe Orlando City fans are going to be excited about, it's definitely going to be Benji Michel, who has really shown some promise ever since he has started to kind of gel into this team, and that he has definitely scored some goals in big moments for this team. So at least there's one player that they can definitely have some great optimism heading into the future. But still, at the end of the day, Orlando City, of course, drawing 1-1 to FC Cincinnati, and that they, of course, are officially eliminated from the playoffs. In terms of the shots in this game, 16 shots compared to 13 that Orlando City has, 7 shots on goal compared to 3 that Orlando City has, 7 shots off target compared to 6 that Orlando City has, 2 shots that was blocked compared to 4 that Orlando City has. And possession-wise, 55% possession compared to 45% possession that FC Cincinnati has. And, FC Cincinnati, in these last couple of games, they're definitely playing the spoiler road, and although they technically didn't have to do anything in terms of spoiling Orlando City chances, because once New England won their game, it was pretty much official that Orlando City was going to be eliminated from the playoffs. They still, of course, count as spoiling their chances, and that, this last couple of games, Cincinnati has definitely shown some fight in some of their games, and that is definitely something that is maybe going to be a positive heading into next season because, for majority of the season, they look like they just gave up before the game actually started. But now they started to show some fight and show some spirit and started to get some points. I think maybe things are going to work out in the future. Now, talking about the next game is Columbus versus Philly. Now, if there's one team that certainly has been long eliminated and certainly have not given up whatsoever, is Columbus. I mean, this team, besides Colorado, who, actually, I don't even want to say Colorado too because technically they're not eliminated from the playoffs, but I think this is like the only team that is currently eliminated from the playoffs that is playing like they are a playoff team right now. Because in this game, they beat Philly 2-0 at home, and in the first half, in the 43rd minute, there was definitely a bit of concern if you're a Union fan when you saw Bedoya got subbed off of a quad injury. I mean, he's definitely an important leader for that team, and you just hope that he's going to be all right and that he's going to be back when the playoffs, of course, started. But since he suffered a quad injury, he could be out for a couple of weeks, and that is definitely going to take a bit of a dent in terms of Philly chances of going deep into the playoffs. But in the second half, Philly had chances to get the opening goal, but they were wasteful in front of goal, and Columbus basically took advantage of Philly inability to put the ball into the back of the net by finding a way to put the ball in the back of the net their own. And it started in the 69th minute when Jonas Mokhtar scores from Pedro Santos and Diaz to give them a 1-0 lead. Then Santos himself scoring an absolute banger, which it seemed like that's what Pedro Santos has been doing this season, where it seemed like every time when he scored, it has to be a banger. It has to be something that's either outside the 18-yard box or just something that is an absolute rifle that no goalkeeper is going to save that. And, with that goal, that gives Columbus the 2-0 lead, and that's all they need to win this game against the Union. As, again, this team, despite the fact that they're eliminated, they just are not showing that giving up mentality, and that in terms of the shots in this game, they had 12 shots compared to 10 that Philly has. 7 shots on goal compared to 3 that Philly has. 3 shots off target compared to 4 that Philly has. 2 shots that was blocked compared to 3 that Philly has. And possession-wise, 46% possession and compared to 54% possession that Philly has. And just as what I said about Chicago, where I'm interested to see how that team is going to go in the future, and that there's definitely some bright future heading into next season, there's definitely going to be the case with the Columbus Crew. And I would say maybe the Columbus Crew has even a brighter future than what Chicago has, because clearly you can see that this team already has the talent, and it seemed like they also have somehow find a way replaced seeing Zach Steffen, their main goalkeeper, with Eloy Rome, that has certainly becoming a very under-the-radar goalkeeper, and certainly a goalkeeper that I think if he's going to continue this trend where he's making some big save with the Crew, he's definitely going to be recognized as one of the best goalkeeper in the league, and a guy that has just kind of almost like a diamond in the rough kind of finding for Columbus actually kind of work out in the end, and that they actually may have just found a replacement for Zach Steffen that they didn't feel like that was actually going to be the case. But like I said, they definitely have a bright future heading into next season, with the fact that I think some of the players that they have is definitely going to bring this team back to a Crew team that for the last couple of years been considered one of the most consistent and one of the best team in MLS. And as for Philly, like I said, with the Bedoya injury, that could definitely take a serious dent in their playoff hope. And this is also an example of the fact that Philly, there's times where they can really turn it up and can be going toe-to-toe against the best team in the league. And then there are times where they look like this, which was absolutely uninspiring. And in order to go on a deep run in the playoffs or even win MLS Cup, you need to consistently be good and consistently be strong, and that is something that I do have some concern with Philly, considering the fact that they're not consistently strong and not consistently shown that they can, of course, put a fear into an opposition hand when they, of course, face against them. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is Montreal, who drew 1-1 against Atlanta. And I think back in the preview, I said that Montreal was eliminated in the playoffs. And yeah, when I look back at the standings, I knew that I actually made a mistake and that Montreal technically wasn't actually eliminated from the playoffs, and that technically there actually was a place higher than what Orlando City is. But as I said, because New England did win their game against NYCFC, Montreal, of course, are eliminated from the playoffs. And, despite the fact that they got eliminated from the playoffs, obviously they got the Canadian Championship this season, which means that they're going to be going to CCL heading into next season. And this resort definitely is a resort that you could say that there's definitely some promise that Montreal could actually do something heading into the next season, even though I've been hearing a lot of Impact fans saying that it's basically time to rebuild for this team. Now, in the first half, there was no score, but in the second half, Julian Gresso scores from Emerson Hyman, and I forgot to put what a backheel that was from Hyman. I mean, did you see how he basically just backheeled that one right into Julian Gresso with a 1-2 play? Like, that is just, that couldn't be a perfect 1-2 play than what you just saw in that instant. Like, that was just absolute textbook kind of play, and almost kind of reminds me of Atlanta United when they are at their best, and that they can, of course, pull off those kind of world-class kind of attacking move. And certainly this was a world-class attacking move by Hyman to backheel Gresso to send him through on goal, and he, of course, gave Atlanta a 1-0 lead at that point. But Montreal did get the equalizer in the 81st minute, and it's actually Bojan that got the equalizer from Okwanko to tie the game up at 1 apiece. But after Montreal got the equalizer, just 40 seconds later, Villalba scores what looked like it was going to be the second goal for Atlanta, and looked like Atlanta just retook the lead in this game. But they go to VAR, and later they said that it was deemed offside. And what happened in this instant was that before Villalba basically put that one into the back of the net, originally when Barco tried to chip Clement Diop in this instant, the ball actually hits the post, and I believe, who was that? I think it was Justin Miram. Let me check the notes to make sure. Yeah, it was Justin Miram who was actually standing in an offside position. And although he didn't really actually touch the ball, he looked like he was attempting to try to get the ball. And when you, of course, are trying to attempt to get the ball, even if you're in an offside position, it's going to count offside in that instance. So, great call by the official in terms of seeing that. And here's a great example of why VAR works in MLS, and that, I don't really need to get into a discussion of why VAR sometimes is just considered one of the worst things to be ever created in MLS, and all those bad calls that's going. But there's a great example of the use of that. But still, despite the fact that the goal was ruled off, Atlanta just, for the last 7 minutes, absolutely peppered that Montreal goal. And Clement Diop, a guy that I know for a couple of years ago when he was with the Galaxy, there was definitely some very embarrassing moments, and was criticized as one of the worst, if not the worst, goalkeeper to ever play in MLS. Well, in this game, he definitely did not show he's the worst goalkeeper in the league. In fact, he's shown his world-class ability by coming up some big save to rescue the draw for Montreal. And technically, I shouldn't say rescue, because technically, even with this draw, this doesn't mean that Montreal is going to stay alive in terms of elimination, and that they're still going to get eliminated because New England did win their game against NYCFC. But they still get a big draw against one of the better team in the league. And in terms of shots in this game, 16 shots compared to 14 that Atlanta has, 4 shots on goal compared to 6 that Atlanta has, 5 shots off target compared to 8 that Atlanta has, 1 shot that was blocked compared to none that Atlanta has, and possession-wise, 47% possession compared to 53% possession. And if you're Atlanta United, yeah, there's definitely time to be a little bit concerned about this team, because it's clear that without Joseph Martinez in this team just looked like an average team. And that I just think that, with Joseph potentially not coming back at the earliest, probably in the conference semifinal or in the second round of the playoffs, I do really worry about who Atlanta is going to face in their first opponent. I mean, the good news is at least they get home field advantage of that first round of playoffs because they already clinched at least one playoff game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium this season. But my concern is that with the way that they have looked in the last couple of games and without Joseph Martinez, I just don't know. Can they, of course, able to overcome a victory even though they don't have their star-studded striker in this team. And last season, obviously, this was kind of something similar with Atlanta kind of fading away, and there was a lot of question whether or not if this team is going to be fit enough to make the playoffs. And it turns out they were fit enough to make the playoffs, and they went all the way to win MLS Cup. But the difference between last year to this year is that last year, when their playoffs started, at least they had Almiron somewhat healthy in the first game of the playoffs. This season, I doubt Joseph Martinez is going to try his best to play with this team when this team play in the first round, and that if that is the case, that might not work out as good as what we saw with Almiron's situation because at least Almiron we knew that he was at least kind of 80 or 90% healthy. If Joseph Martinez literally comes back for the first round of the playoffs when Atlanta face whoever they face in the first round of the playoffs, at best, I would say he may be 40 or 50% healthy enough to, of course, play against that opponent. And there's just no way you can see a guy that's 50 or 30% healthy to be playing full 90 minutes of a playoff game. But moving on into the final game on this board, and kind of the final game that I will talk about in terms of the Eastern Conference clash to now kind of move on into the Western Conference clash that we had in the last 6 game of this MLS Matchweek, is the Red Bulls and DC United play in a 0-0 draw. And yeah, this definitely did not live up to expectation. I mean, I thought that there was going to be some fireworks in this game, which in some way there was kind of some fireworks. I mean, both teams kind of really fought hard in terms of the midfield, and that, it felt like both teams really want the 3 points so that they can at least get a home field advantage. Because remember, both of these teams is currently 4th and 5th, and if the playoffs started today, this would be the matchup, and that the only difference is this one will be at Audi Field instead of at Red Bull Arena. But, in the first half, there was no score and rarely anything happened in the first half. The second half, Red Bulls did start to threatening, but Hamid did make some big save to make sure this game stay at 0-0, and ultimately this game did stay at 0-0 and finish in a scoreless draw. As in terms of the shots in this game, 15 shots compared to 7 that DC had, 3 shots on goal compared to none that DC had, 8 shots off target compared to 4 that DC had, 4 shots that was blocked compared to 3 that DC had, and possession-wise, 53% possession compared to 47% possession. And I think when you look at this game with the way that it seemed like both teams looks very even, something tells me that when playoff time comes, this could maybe be something very similar where it's going to be kind of a gritty game where, whoever maybe scored the first goal ultimately will win this game, because both teams show that they were very good in terms of defending, and that both goalkeeper, well, at least Bill Hamid actually makes some big save and certainly shows up in the big time, while Luis Robles was kind of a spectator because DC didn't even bother putting a shot on goal in this game. But yeah, I'm still going to be very interested to see how this game is going to play out, if both of these teams are going to be meeting in the playoffs. And, heading into that final week, we shall see who exactly is going to get a win in that final week of the season. Because if the Red Bulls are able to get a win and DC didn't get a win, then I think the Red Bulls would be having home field advantage at least at one of their game, and DC would not. And basically it's vice versa if DC, of course, win their game and the Red Bulls do not win their final game of the season. But that being said, let me now move on and switch the board and look at the Western Conference clash in this match week. Alrighty, so now let's take a look at the 6 games which were the Western Conference clash for this match week. And let's just get this out of the way. We're going to talk about the Quakes versus the Sounders because, if there's one word I can describe the Quakes' 5-game losing streak, and actually I have multiple one word that I can describe the 5-game losing streak that the Quakes have been going through right now heading into the latter part of the season, is heartbreak, cruel, and absolutely undeserved. Because when you look at these last 5 resort, I don't think there has been one game where we've been outplayed. And yet, somehow, in some way, if you look at these 5 resort, we had some of the most cruelest resort that you can see, where either a bad call goes against us, which was very common in the last 4 games, although not so much in this game. I thought this game, in terms of the call, was relatively balanced, and I think maybe the only thing that I will kind of question in terms of the referee decision isn't actually against us, but it's actually going against the Sounders with this red card that Arriaga received in the 77th minute. But, the referee has gone against us in the last couple of games. We had a couple of bounces that just doesn't go our way. And also, not to mention the fact that we have suffered a couple of heartbreak in the last couple of games. I mean, you look at the Atlanta resort, we were this close from getting a 1-1 resort, despite the fact that we were down to 10 men for 65 minutes, and we were just showing that heart and passion that you think it should get over the line. Nope. Instead, concede a goal in the 89th minute, then concede another to lose 3-1 in that game. And then in that Union game, 1-0 up, looks good, and it seemed like things were going to go well and that maybe we could get 3 points. Nope. Instead, gave up 2 goals quickly and then end up losing 2-1. And obviously, let's also not forget to mention what happened in the 84th minute, when I still think that was a penalty. That was in favor of us, and that VAR should have never overturned that penalty call. And then in this game, it was a 0-0 game heading in the latter part, and it looked like it was going to end 0-0 with the way that it kind of, both teams was kind of looking very even in the large part of this game. Well, actually, I wouldn't say both teams had looked even. It was more the fact that the Sounders were trying to hold on, and the Quakes was inability to put the ball into the back, and that is the reason why this might end 0-0. And then Morris scores in the 94th minute after, originally when I thought it was just a simple long ball and that Seattle got very lucky with an over-the-top ball. But when I closer look at it, it looked like the reason why that ball actually went through was because Eriksson made a bad mistake by flicking that one right back into the path of Jordan Morris, and Morris basically went through on goal and basically easily slots it home to get the only goal of this game. And yeah, I mean, that's just been our luck for the last 5 games. I mean, I don't think there's any team in the league that has just been that unlucky than it is the San Jose Earthquakes for these last 5 games. And unfortunately, just because we're unlucky and just because these resort is going to be cruel, at the end of the day and at the end of the season, if we're not going to make the playoffs, this is going to be remembered as the season we're not going to make the playoffs. Like, nobody's in 5 years is going to remember the fact that, oh, yeah, you remember that 5-game stretch where the Quakes were on that losing streak and kind of collapsing, and that it was a very unlucky kind of collapse that they were on because there was referee decision that gone against them, and that there was a couple of bounces that gone against them. No, nobody's going to remember that in 5 years. So is what is so frustrating about what me being a Quakes fan now, and that, the only silver lining I can say about this resort is that, at least the other resort kind of gone in favor of us, with Portland, of course, drawing, and Dallas, of course, losing to Colorado, which, by the way, just to mention it a couple of minutes later, and I just cannot hold myself saying this, but somehow, in some way, Colorado is still alive in terms of their playoff hope. But yeah, I mean, hopefully the Quakes, of course, can bounce back in the next game. Obviously, the next game against Portland is a must-win. Like, that is a game where, I feel like the winner of that game is going to make the playoffs, and the loser of that game is going to be out for the playoffs. Even though technically, when you look at playoff scenario, the Quakes, even if they don't win, depending on what other result goes, and that it might be go in favor of them, they of course still will able to move on in the playoffs. But I'm just not going to really get into that until I'll talk about it in the preview, and maybe even not talk about it in the preview, because the next game is really a must-win for us, and that, talking about the red card in this game, and that, the Thompson red card was definitely a red card, and I know originally there was a lot of fans were complaining and booing about that call, but they didn't realize that Thompson actually decided to stomp on Christian Rodon, which is very unlike Tommy Thompson. I mean, this season, I don't know what is it with the Quakes, but it feels like Mateus Almeida has kind of bring this team to be a very aggressive team, which I have no problem with the Quakes being an aggressive team. But at the same time, there's got to be a point where you want to be aggressive, but you don't want to be too aggressive and just lose your composure. And I've seen it a couple of times this season, especially down the stretch now, that we have lost our heads and lost our composure. And that this, of course, is one of the reasons to happen. Because there's no doubt, in previous year, you will never see Tommy Thompson does that. And I believe that is actually I think that's the first red card that Tommy Thompson has received in his time with the Quakes. But thankfully for us, Seattle wasn't able to take advantage of that man advantage, and they of course themselves got sent off. And this is where I go back to where I said that I think, the referee I think was pretty good in this game. The only thing that kind of was a little bit questionable was this red card that the Sounders got, and that I feel like this shouldn't have been a red card on Arriaga. I mean, I know he made a bad challenge on Houston outside the box. And by the way, originally they said it was a penalty, but then they, of course, overturned it. And I know fans were mad again because of this is basically deja vu all over again like last time, and especially right around the same time where we got our penalty rule out against the Union. But that was the right call. I mean, when you look on the replay, it was clearly outside the box. But, even with that kind of foul, I feel like Arriaga probably should have at least deserved a final warning. And that, I know there's an old saying, if you're on a yellow card, you just have to be very careful with your challenges. And I just feel like that he was just careful enough to not really deem a second yellow. But fortunately, the referee didn't see that. And that's why we end up 10v10 soccer. And that's why it was really up in the air for the last 20 minutes of this game. But in terms of shots in this game, 23 shots compared to 9 that Seattle has, 10 shots on goal compared to 5 that the Sounders had, 6 shots off target compared to 2 that the Sounders had, 7 shots that was blocked compared to 2 that the Sounders had, and possession-wise, 61% possession compared to 39% possession that the Sounders had. And for the Sounders, I know a lot of people are saying that they got lucky with this resort. I'm not going to say that they got lucky with this resort, but one thing that I am going to say is that don't take this resort thinking like everything is fine. I mean, there is still problem with the Sounders team, and that they're still kind of proving me right with the fact that if you have 1 or 2 star-studded player get injured in the starting 11, this team looked like a very average team. And in this game, if only they had Nicholas Ladero in this game, I think it would have added in more of a spice to that Sounders attack. But other than that attack for the Sounders for majority of the game was just pretty dead. Like, there was really not a lot of chances that they had in this game, and that because of them missing Ladero, and because of the fact that it's been proven throughout the season, once they have a couple of players go down with injury and they put on some of those reserve players, those players are not going to step up and unable to basically at least try to show that some similar quality as the starter does, which is why this is maybe the reason why I don't think the Sounders is going to get far in the playoffs. And that, yes, they might get home field advantage, and yes, they might maybe get high enough where they may get 2 games at home, but at the end of the day, if you have injuries in the playoffs, which injuries does happen in the playoffs, and more so and often it happens more often than in the regular season, the Sounders are going to be doomed. Like, they are literally 1 or 2 injury away from being doomed in a playoff series. But moving on, in the next match is going to be SKC versus Portland. Now, I know when you saw this result between the Galaxy versus Vancouver, which I'll get to this game, you would think that I say this is the craziest game of this week. No. This was the craziest game of the week. Because while this game had the goals to prove that it was the craziest game of the week, this had pretty much everything and the goals that proved that it is the game of the week. But in the first half, and 29 minutes into this game, Sebastian Blanco gave Portland an early lead, and he actually almost missed that by hitting that one a little bit too high and actually hit the post. But fortunately, that ball bounced off the post and into the back of the net to give the Timbers a 1-0 lead. But unfortunately, that lead did not last long, and in fact, it basically lasts all but 30 seconds because Namath then scores from Russell and Espinoza to tie the game up at 1 apiece, and I'm pretty sure that Giovanni Savarese down at the touchline has to be absolutely fuming the fact that their team just went up 1-0 on the road, and they literally just gave it away just 30 seconds after they did that. Now, in the 34th minute, this is where the main talking point, and this was really the storyline of this game, where there was 2 red cards was shown to Brian Fernandez and Roger Espinoza, and the Timbers are actually going to be trying to appeal this red card on Brian Fernandez, which I'm not quite sure it's going to be successful, because here's why. So what happened in this incident was that originally, I believe Gutierrez basically shoved Fernandez, and obviously Fernandez was not happy. Both guys started to have heated words, and then they kind of come up to each other, and then next thing you know, both players got a yellow card because of that. And then after Gutierrez basically had some heated exchanging words with Brian Fernandez, he then decided to turn around and basically gone head to head with Sebastian Blanco, and it looks like both players was just trying to headbutt each other. And then Brian Fernandez, the reason why he got sent off was he decided to put his hand on the neck of Felipe Gutierrez. Now, I know some people are saying that he didn't deliberately doing that, and that maybe he's trying to just kind of hold Felipe Gutierrez back. But anytime when you basically get your hands on an opponent's neck or face, yeah, that is an automatic red card. And that although it looks soft, it looks like something that may be appeal. That's at the end of the day, that is the rule of the case, and I think that because of that rule, this is also the reason why the appeal will probably not be successful, and that, Brian Fernandez is going to miss that crucial game against the Portland or against the San Jose Earthquakes on that final game of the season that really would decide who exactly is going to make the playoffs in the Western Conference. Now, Roger Espinoza got sent off because while Blanco and Gutierrez was headbutting each other, he then decided to basically do his classic Roger Espinoza kind of way, which is trying to choke hold Sebastian Blanco. And because of that, that is another textbook example of getting your hands into opponent's face. Although that was even more egregious because he was trying to choke hold him, and he basically got sent off for that. And with that sending off, that's the 11th send off that Roger Espinoza has got in MLS, which is now the most red card that any player besides Roger Espinoza has got so far in MLS history. So I guess Espinoza, in a good way, he didn't make some history in this game, but he kind of made some naughty history by being the guy that has sent off the most in all his career in MLS. So at that point, it was 10v10 soccer, and then in the second half, literally 40 seconds into the second half, SCC took their first lead, and guess who got the lead for them? No, it's not Johnny Russell, but Daniel Shallowy, a guy that I don't think, if there is any player that I can think that it doesn't deserve a goal, and a guy that has just been so unlucky with the way that he hasn't scored a goal this season, has to be Daniel Shallowy, because I think during the part of the broadcast, they said that he had like 49 or 41 shots so far taken this season, and yet none of them end up into the back of the net. Well, finally, that drought ended today as he scored his first ever goal of the season, his first ever goal ever since, I think, November in the playoffs last season, and that, of course, gave SKC a 2-1 lead. Now, as the game goes on, and the fact that the game stays at 2-1, I was also watching, kind of keep my eye on this game while I was watching this one, because this one has some implication in terms of the Quakes playoff hope. I just had a feeling that SKC was going to blow it, because SKC, alongside with the Quakes, I think have dropped the most points when they are leading in the game. And lo and behold, my feeling of them eventually blowing this game and giving Portland the equalizer came true in the 84th minute, when Ilya, of course, brought down, or at least pulled, one of the Timbers player, and of course that was given a penalty, and he was also getting a sending off because of a denial of goal score opportunity. So now SKC is down to 9 men, and Aspira then scores on the penalty, which is the first time that Melia was beaten on a penalty kick. And I think he's already faced like 2 or 3 penalty kicks, and the fact that this is his first time that he has ever got beaten is quite impressive. And it also kind of explains why Tim Melia, in my opinion, is the best penalty kick stopper in the league right now. But yeah, at the end of the day, Portland, despite the fact that we're up a man for the remaining of this game, wasn't able to get that third goal, and it ends in a crazy 2-2 draw, which with shots in this game at 16-14 in favor of SKC. SKC had 5 shots on goal compared to 6 that Portland has, 9 shots off target compared to 6 that Portland has. Both teams had 2 shots that was blocked, and possession-wise, 51% possession compared to 49% possession that SKC had. And for Sporting KC, this performance is basically a summary of their season, which is every time they seem like there's hope that they can get all 3 points in the game, they somehow find a way to blow it late in the game. And as for Portland, despite the fact that they did get a draw in this game, I think they definitely feel like they want to get a win, and that they need to get a win in this game. I mean, the good news for them is that at least for the last game of the season, when they play against the San Jose Earthquakes, that will decide who will make the playoffs or not, they will, of course, get to play that game at home. However, unlike previous season where you would think that that's probably going to be a victory for the Timbers when they're playing at home against the Quakes, which could still be the case because Portland has never lost to the Quakes at home. This season, I'm not quite so sure that that is going to be the case, and I'm not quite so sure that that record can hold up, considering the fact that the Timbers have been absolutely abysmal so far at home, and that ever since they, of course, won 1-0 or win 2-1 against SKC, they have just looked like a team that just kind of fall apart, really. And, this is also why it's going to be intriguing in that Portland versus San Jose match, where you got 2 teams that is just falling apart, and yet one of those teams are eventually going to make the playoffs. I mean, that doesn't really kind of make sense whatsoever, but I guess you could say that if both of these teams fall apart, maybe that game, of course, ends in a draw, which it will go in favor of Portland with them. If they can get a draw out of that game, I think most likely they will able to move on into the playoff spot. But moving on into the next game, as I spent a little bit time talk about that game, is the Rapids. So as I said earlier in this video, they're still alive. Yes, the Rapids is somehow still alive with this 3-0 win against Dallas, and that I honestly don't know how in the world this team has been alive. Like, this team, I think for the last 5 weeks has been up for elimination, and it seemed like as every week goes by, the numbers just continue to go against them, and it's almost as if they had their backs against the wall, and that wall is getting closer and closer of squeezing them, and yet somehow in some way they're not getting squashed. They're still alive in the playoff hole, and in fact, maybe they're in the best chance ever out of their last couple of games of maybe even not getting eliminated and somehow pull off one of the most miraculous playoff kind of clinching spot you will ever see in MLS history. Now, in this game, they of course were able to keep their hopes alive by beating FC Dallas 3-0, and also thanking Seattle and SKC of not able to lose their opponent, which is the Timbers and San Jose. But in this game, they of course got a deserved 3-0 win against Dallas, and that 10 minutes into this game, Jack Price scores from Shinishiki to give them a 1-0 lead. Then before halftime, Rubio doubles that lead, and I wrote shocking set-piece defending by FC Dallas because, Colorado took the free kick quickly. Dallas was completely unprepared for that. The wall was still not really in shape, and that Rubio basically found a gap in that wall, and he basically puts it away for the second goal, and Colorado goes up 2-0 at halftime. Then it was 3-0 when Kamara scores from Mesquita in the 72nd minute, and that it could have even been more if it wasn't for Jesse Gonzalez, which earlier in this game he actually saved a penalty from, I think, Kamara, and that could have also gave Colorado a 2-0 lead. And then late in the game, he made a triple save where he basically not only denied Mesquita on the byline, but he also denied Danny Wilson, who basically had an empty net to shoot. He was 6 yards out, and he had 2 chances to strike that one, and yet somehow in some way Gonzalez was able to save both of them. I have no idea how that did not went into the back of the net and how that was not 4-0. But yeah, this game would have been a lot uglier if it wasn't for Jesse Gonzalez at least making some crucial save in some pivotal moments. But overall, Colorado still gets the win. And in terms of shots in this game, 14 shots compared to 17 that Dallas had. 10 shots on goal compared to 3 that Dallas had. 2 shots off target compared to 9 that Dallas had. 2 shots that was blocked compared to 5 that Dallas had. And possession-wise, 45% possession compared to 55% possession that Dallas had. And that for Colorado, if they win next week against LAFC, and if Portland and San Jose aren't able to get a victory, or actually if San Jose and Dallas is not able to get a victory, then they are going to make the playoffs. I mean, if that is going to be the case, and I know that is still a long shot that it can happen, and that, you can also say that it's maybe going to be a miracle if all that kind of pieces will somehow play in the hand of Colorado, but the way that they have got to this point where they're still alive in the playoffs, and being a spoiler team that I have been saying throughout this time, I feel like maybe after all they weren't just being a spoiler team, and maybe the fact that they were just keeping their hopes alive, and that here we are heading into decision day, and with this miraculous run that they have, and despite the fact that they still need some miraculous thing to happen, who knows? It might happen to them, and that if it does happen, I'm going to say this has go down to be one of the greatest comeback a team has done in a season where long and before it looked like this team was dead and buried in terms of their playoff hope, and yet somehow in some way on the final day of the season they were able to sneak in to the playoffs. And if this team does get into the playoffs, believe me, nobody want to play this team. I think besides LAFC, you could argue Colorado is the second best team in the Western Conference. And we've seen so many times before, when teams get hot coming into the playoffs, they are going to do damage, and that they could really surprise many teams and go as far as MLS Cup. So, yeah, I mean, if the Rapids does make the playoffs, I'm really going to keep an eye on them, considering how far exactly they are going to make it through the playoffs with the hot streak that they have. And as for Dallas, yeah, the good news is they're still above the red line, and that if they win against SKC, who is not going to have Espinoza and Ilya in the next game, then they'll make the playoffs either way. My concern with Dallas right now is that once they make the playoffs, are they actually going to win that game? And the answer to that is probably not, because they're going to be on the road no matter what in the first round of the playoffs. And knowing their road record, which they have only won 3 games this season and have lost 11 games so far on the road, which is only second to Houston in terms of the most road loss a Western Conference team has suffered, I don't really give them a lot of chance of them going on the road and able to win a game. But hey, it is the playoffs. The playoffs can be sometimes very crazy and sometimes completely against what people think. But I just think with the way Dallas has been playing on the road, I don't know how are they going to make any noise going for in the playoffs. And it's not like they had a good playoff resume too. I mean, the last couple of playoff appearances, they have been kind of a one and done team, and it seemed like this might be the case once again if they do make it to the playoffs. But moving on into the next game, is the other crazy game of this week. Although, this game, I would say that if you are a person that like defense, yeah, prepare to not listen to this game, because there was no defense playing this game. Like, this was literally, you could have been mistaken this as a FIFA Ultimate Team kind of match, with the way that both teams just literally go for it on the attack, and the defense for both teams looked like just high school level defending. Now, 30 seconds into this game, before I get into Vancouver getting the first goal in the 20th minute, Vancouver actually almost took the lead and actually hits the post 30 seconds into the game, and that could have been 1-0 in favor of Vancouver. Now, they eventually did make it 1-0 when Daniel Henry scores from inbound to give them a 1-0 lead. But then, 3 minutes later, Zlatan scores from Pavone to tie the game up at 1 apiece. Right before halftime, Theo Bair scores to give Vancouver the lead at halftime. And I wrote offside, and I forgot to put a question mark, because when you look at that play and when you freeze camp that play, yeah, it looked very close, the fact that Bair was actually in an onside position. I mean, if anything, he probably was level with the last defender, and that's why VAR did not call it offside, because I think when they look at VAR in this, they didn't see any decisive evidence that it should have been overturned. So this goal, of course, stand, and the Whitecaps had a 2-1 lead heading into halftime. But in the second half, I accidentally put the wrong name here. It's actually the Galaxy that scored this. The Galaxy, of course, tied the game up when Orel Otuna scores to tie the game up at 2 apiece. And this was actually a lovely chip from Otuna, although I will also say this was a big mistake from Maxime Crepeau to come off his line. Like, he basically decided to come off his line, and then he kind of got a little bit undecided. And as much as Crepeau was pretty good in this game and made a couple of big saves, this goal is definitely going to be on him, of the fact that he came off his line kind of way too early, and when he did come off his line, he was kind of a little bit undecided, and he basically just got caught into no man's land as soon as Otuna basically chipped him, and just like that, the game is tied up at 2 apiece. But the game did not stay tied very long, because in the 64th minute, Tosan Rikic scores from Godoy and Imbaum, and by the way, Imbaum had a very nice game in this, with 3 assists in this game, and certainly a guy that I think he's going to get man of the match contention with the way that he was able to get 3 assists in this game. But it also has something to do with the fact that he was playing against a Galaxy defense that basically just let him decide to pass the ball to his teammates with ease, and setting up his teammate to score a goal, because again, there was no defense in this game whatsoever. In the 77th minute, Zlatan looked like he got the Galaxy back to level term when he scored in the 77th minute, but unfortunately he was caught offside, because originally when the ball comes to him, he was in an offside position, and therefore that goal, of course, was ruled out, and the game stays at 3-2. But eventually it was 3-3, and the Galaxy eventually did get the equalizer when Pontius, who literally just came on 3 minutes after he scored, before he scored this goal, scores from Zlatan and Polenta to tie the game up once again for the Galaxy, and that this was just really a back and forth game. And just as you think that things are not going to get any crazier, and that's clearly the last of the crazy things that's going to happen in this game, right? You're wrong. In the 93rd minute, Chirino scores from Imbong and Montero to give Vancouver the late winner. And if I had room on this board, I would have wrote some of the worst defending I have ever seen a team play. Like, when you see what happened in this instance where the Galaxy, once they turned the ball over, nobody in their player in their own half decided to track back and decided to try to defend a potential counterattack for the Whitecaps. Like, the Whitecaps were ready to go on a counterattack, and they also had like 3 players that was going upfield completely unmarked, and yet somehow in some way there was only 1 defender for the Galaxy. And I mean, I was just absolutely shocked when I saw that 3-on-1 situation. Like, I was asking myself, where in the world is the Galaxy defense? Like, I know this game did not have any defense, but the fact that I saw that happening, and I don't think even in Ultimate Team that you can even see this kind of instant where you have a 3-on-1 scenario and just nobody track back whatsoever. I mean, it was just some of the most shocking defending I have ever seen of my life. And the Whitecaps, of course, took full advantage of that. And they, of course, pull off the upset of the week by winning 4-3 against the Galaxy. In terms of the shots in this game, 17 shots compared to 13 that the Whitecaps had. Both teams had 7 shots on goal. 6 shots off target compared to 5 that the Whitecaps had. 4 shots that was blocked compared to 1 that the Whitecaps had. And possession-wise, 60% possession compared to 40% possession. And that, for the Galaxy, you know why I think they're not going to go deep into the playoffs or potentially make MLS Cup? Well, the reason why they're not going to do that is because their defense is absolutely horrible. Like, seriously, if the worst team in the Western Conference and one of the worst team in terms of scoring goals is able to put 4 on you on the road, then you know that your defense is absolutely garbage. And you know that if this was a better team facing against you, this would have definitely not looked closer than what this game would have looked like. And, you know, I think for the Galaxy heading into the playoffs, while they have a lot of sexy kind of attacking forward and that they obviously have the Ferrari up front with Zlatan, Pavone, and all those guys, they basically just have a poor man Fiat at the back with just guys that just simply does not know how to defend, and that when playoff time comes and you know you're going to face some of those teams that have good attacking power, something tells me that unless if the Galaxy is going to able to win 5-4 or 4-3, like these kind of game, they are not going to go very deep into the playoffs. And trying to win high score heading into the playoffs is always a recipe for disaster. But now moving on into the next match, as I'm kind of running a little bit late in terms of doing this part of the review because there was a lot to talk about in terms of the Western Conference matchup. Not so much in terms of the Eastern Conference matchup because some of those games was kind of a little bit uneventful. This game between Minnesota and LAFC is kind of like that, but you know, in the first half, both teams had chances to potentially score the first goal, but unfortunately they weren't able to take advantage of that. And in the second half, Vela, of course, scores from Diego Rossi, and not only I forgot to put goal of the week, but I also want to mention that have now officially tied the record that Josef Martinez set last year with the most goal ever in a single season in MLS at 31 goals. And he has a chance to break that record in the next game against the Rapids, and I'll definitely bet my money if he is going to do that in the next game against the Rapids. I mean, if he does break that record, then there is no doubt that he is going to win MVP this season, and that it's just been one of the most incredible individual performance we have ever seen by a single player have put up in a single season in MLS this season. So, you know, we'll see if Vela, of course, can break that record, but that lead that LAFC got didn't last very long because 5 minutes later, Michael Boxhall scores from Jan Gregish, and I think if there's one weakness that I'm started finding with LAFC, the one weakness I'm started finding with them is that they have trouble in terms of defending set pieces. Because when you see some of the goals that they have conceded in these last couple of games, it's either they have trouble in terms of defending set pieces or they just get caught on the counterattack. And I won't be surprised in the playoffs, teams are going to try to do that where they're going to try to rely on set piece goals and trying to rely on the counterattack. And it's up to LAFC to try to adjust to that. But yeah, in the end, the game ended up at a 1-1 tie, despite the fact that the Loons did had a couple of chances late in the game. The only reason why they didn't get the winner is because Ceci Bianca made a couple of big saves. But in terms of shots in this game, LAFC had 20 shots compared to 14 that Minnesota has. 5 shots on goal compared to 7 that Minnesota has. 11 shots off target compared to 7 that Minnesota has. 4 shots that was blocked compared to none that Minnesota has. And possession-wise, 67% possession that LAFC had compared to 33% possession that Minnesota has. And that, you know, for LAFC, I really think that in some way, they are kind of finding a similar situation that Atlanta found themselves last year, where when teams are starting to find them out, they need to basically think about readjusting. And what Atlanta did last year when teams started finding them out how to stop that un unstoppable force of an attack that is the Atlanta United attack. Teams are started to try to just sit back and try and let them go at them, which I think some teams are trying to do the same against LAFC, and there has been some level of success so far this season. Now the question is, can LAFC do what Atlanta did last year, which, not necessarily they're going to bunker down and just be a counter-attacking team. I know for sure that Bob Bradley is not going to be that kind of coach that decided to do that, but they need to readjust themselves. Like, they need to make some adjustment if they are going to make a deep run. Like, I still have them favorites of winning MLS Cup, but the last couple of resources, and unless if they don't adjust of what has happened in these last couple of games where teams are starting to find them out and that they need to try to adjust in a way that they're trying to make teams kind of guessing what they're going to do and try to be that unstoppable force that they've been for most of the season, then I do have a lot of concern of the fact that this could maybe, just maybe, a repeat of what happened last year when it was an early playoff exit for them. And as for Minnesota, I'll tell you what, this Loons team, I'm going to say that this is a team that I am also going to keep my eyes on really tight, and that I think this team can easily be a dark horse team that I think could even maybe go as far as MLS Cup. Because when you look at this team at home, they are just unstoppable. Like, so far, only one team this season has been able to beat them at home, and that team isn't even a Western Conference team. Like, no Western Conference team has able to go to Allianz Field to get 3 points and get a win against them. And that, knowing the fact that if Minnesota can win that next game against Seattle, they'll lock up that second spot, which means that they'll at least get 2 home playoff game at Allianz Field, and maybe even a 3rd home game if LAFC does fall in the Western Conference. And if that is going to be the case, then watch out. This Loons team could be like the Timbers team last season, which is a team that you don't expect to go deep into the playoffs and that they don't really have the squad to do it. And next thing you know, they're in MLS Cup. So really watch out for this Minnesota team. And also, one last thing I want to mention in this game, I'm also impressed the fact that not only Minnesota was able to go toe-to-toe once again against the best team in the league, but they did it with a couple of guys missing in this. Like, this was basically kind of a B squad that Minnesota puts, and yet somehow they still got a 1-1 draw against LAFC, which kind of also evidence of why I think they can really be a dark horse team heading into the playoffs. But finally, moving on into the final game of this week, is RSL versus Houston, where RSL won 2-1 against the Dynamo. And with this win, RSL does clinch their playoff spot, although it definitely was not a pretty game from them. Now, in the first minute, what was pretty was Corey Bear, who scores a goal in the first minute and just 3 seconds into the game. And if I would have watched this game live and saw Corey Bear does that, which he basically made a run from the halfway yard and then basically score with a solo effort, I would just be screaming my head off. Like, I would be so happy with this kid, with the way that he's able to score a goal, because after all, he is my most favorite player in MLS besides all the Quakes players that I support. But RSL lead did look like it was in big jeopardy in the 23rd minute when McNamara looked like he equalized for the Dynamo, but the goal, of course, was ruled offside. And the reason why this goal was ruled offside was originally when Manotas was trying to shoot that one, which was saved by Raimondo. Elise kind of obstruct Raimondo and that he was in an offside position, and because of that is ruled offside, and that the goal that Houston got unfortunately did not stand. Now, the good news for the Dynamo is that eventually they did get a goal that was stand, and it happened in the 32nd minute when Thomas Martinez scores to tie the game up at 1 apiece. And I wrote own goal on Raimondo, and I also probably should have put a question mark, because I really felt like maybe this should have been an own goal, with the fact that Thomas Martinez had a very tight angle, and that you could also question Raimondo probably should have done better in terms of that situation, but it looked like that shot was off target, and then it just somehow bounced off of Raimondo's leg and hits it into the back of the net. So I think that probably could have been an own goal, but they said in the end, Martinez was credited with the goal. So the game was all tied up at 1 apiece, but in the 75th minute, RSL finally found that breakthrough after they didn't really do much in the second half. And it was Savarino that scores an absolute banger from Bolfo Salcedo to give them the 2-1 lead. And I also wrote goal of the week because that was an absolute lovely strike from about 18 yards out and basically just kind of cuts in and shoots that one. I mean, that's definitely going to get some consideration of goal of the weekend. Yeah, just like that, RSL, of course, is able to secure the win and also secure their spot in terms of making the playoffs. They had only 8 shots in this game compared to 10 that Houston had. 4 shots on goal compared to 3 that the Dynamo has. 3 shots off target compared to 5 that the Dynamo has. 1 shot that was blocked compared to 2 that the Dynamo has. And possession-wise, 54% possession compared to 46% possession that the Dynamo has. And that, for RSL, like I said, it wasn't a pretty game. But at the end of the day, they were able to get all 3 points. And now they have a chance next week when they go on the road against Vancouver to able to win that game, and depending on what other result goes in favor of them, they could able to host a playoff game at Rio Tinto Stadium. And as for the Dynamo, yeah, they are just hoping this season ends because, yeah, it's clear that they're been done in terms of their playoff hope for a while now, and they just hope that as the seasons end, maybe they're gonna once again start a rebuild and maybe start thinking about looking for their next head coach that's going to take this job. But either way, guys, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. I, of course, will start doing some of those moving forward series episode for some of the elimination teams starting tomorrow. I'll probably continue to do that as we head into after decision day, where we have, I think, 2 weeks before another MLS game is going to kick off. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will be doing the preview for all the decision day matchup on Friday. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.